Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Paul and Vince's Excellent Hobby Adventure.
Adventure.
Yes, that's right. If you're joining us, that means it's time for another hour or so of rambling on painting, the results of our challenges, and of course, as always, bad singing, because that's what we do. That's what we're here for.
Speak for yourself, sir. I have
Hey,
the voice of an angel.
yes, that has fallen far from heaven, like very far, and hit the pavement very hard. It's kind
Possibly
of like
made,
that.
possibly made out of Sigmarite.
Exactly. It's like that City of Angels movie. You're like Nicolas Cage in that movie, but you fell a lot farther. You've studied the movements of the cobra to learn how to paint. That's what it is.
Oh no.
All right. So welcome, Paul. How you doing? How's your general hobbying been going this week?
Not great. So as a precursor, John, or I sort of got shingles on my hip and wasn't able to really do any hobbying whatsoever because I couldn't really sit in my chair. Um, yes, apparently I'm 100 years old and I have shingles. Uh,
I think you can be any age. Isn't that just related to chickenpox?
it is. It's just a reemergence of chickenpox, but
Yeah.
it's much more common in older folk. It usually happens immune depressed. Apparently, I was very jarred by Age of Sigmar.
Age of Sigmar
Age,
nearly killed you.
Age of Sigmar gave me shingles. Thanks,
Yes.
GW. Um, but so I had that issue. I didn't really get to paint for a little bit, and then obviously all this news broke. So I haven't been hobbying a lot. So as you'll see, my mini isn't fully done. I haven't done the base on him, and I rushed through him. I started him Friday night and sort of worked through the weekend, trying to put some stuff together on him. So it hasn't been bad. I'm looking forward to doing some more stuff. I think actually painting this guy, I was all worked up with Age of Sigmar, and a little on the blue end, and then I was painting this mini, and it turned my frown upside down. You know what I'm saying? Just get a little good paint sesh, get a little mini going, and you're ready to go.
That's right. See, now you're talking right. When your ship is sailing into stormy war games waters, just remember, hobby time will always turn that frown upside down. Absolutely.
Hobby time trumps game time every time.
There you go. I like it. Oh, the reality is you spend probably, what, 9 to 1 a ratio doing your hobbying to actually playing the game.
Oh, absolutely.
So, hey, you can always have fun with that regardless. So let's talk about it, shall we? Let's get into some models. So last week, or 2.5 weeks ago, because you're a slacker, uh, our challenge.
2 days, 2 days. Come on.
Slacker. All right. So our challenge was OSL, and so some more After Effects, and
So for a quick intro, for those who don't know, object source lighting, or OSL, is simply picking a different focal point for light to come off your miniature. And what that means is basically normally you'd have your miniature here, you'd be having light from imaginary sun flow down, you'd have your lighter surfaces up towards the top that angle. Well, here on object source lighting, we would have a electrical ball in the case of sci-fi miniatures, or a fire stick or something, or a crystal on fantasy miniatures, giving off light so that it would also be reflecting from, say down here, or wherever that object is giving off light. So that is object source lighting.
perfect. Yes, exactly. Very popular, especially in sci-fi miniatures, like you said, because there tends to be a lot more bright, glowy things around, right? Power swords and lightning swords and things like that. Although there's still plenty of magic. Usually in fantasy, it ends up being magic balls and torches. Yes, I think that's pretty true.
Magic balls and torches.
That's gonna be the new name for this show, Magic Balls and Torches, or perhaps it's my new band. I don't know, Magic Balls and Torches. All right, so let me share up here, and we'll take a look at at the results of our effort. All right, can you see my screen?
I can.
All right, my guy is up first here just because he starts with the letter H and your guy starts with the letter S. So there you go. That's how that works. So I actually, hunted around a little bit because I had OSL'd that girl for Bretonia, but I didn't have another damsel similarly that I wanted to paint. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I had picked up a High Elf Force on the let's say at an unreasonable price. I'm sure thanks to Age of Sigmar Panic. Stop selling me your armies cheap, people. That's not a good idea. And so I had this little wizard guy here who was from like the Island of Blood box set, I think. And by the way, what a great model this guy is, right?
Love that model. Love it.
Yeah, for a starter kit model, like man, they really knock it out of the park with this dude. So I thought, hey, why not? Let's paint him. He's on a big glowing magical effect there. He's on some kind of magical whirlwind thing. So I thought I would challenge myself twice with this model because the other trick to OSL is that usually it's easiest when the model itself is fairly dark, right?
Correct.
So that the contrast is strong and it shows out. You're kind of oftentimes OSL, it needs to be in a dark environment, right? Like there is no bright light source at overhead, like at the noon. Because if you think about it, if you were holding something that was, lit up and you're standing outside in the sunshine in the middle of the day, that's not really casting much light on you, right?
No, yeah.
Because the sun is so bright. And so it's sort of OSL kind of assumes that you're in a dimmer environment. And so it tends to use darker muted colors. Again, if you just, go walk around outside at night in the moonlight and look at colors, they don't look bright and shiny like they normally do. Everything's in sort of hints of gray and browns and things. So my challenge here was twofold. I wanted to challenge myself to do a model that still looked high elfy and was still bright, but at the same time also had this extremely bright magical effect under it. So I knew this was going to be a subtle OSL piece. And I didn't think about the fact when I started this that whites almost never really show their color tonal variation in photos because when your digital thing is trying to rebuild white, it doesn't do great at that. But hey, there we go. So I'll kind of zip through here. This one's pretty good because you can see that basically what I'm going for is the light coming up from the little magical glowy ball, and it's casting this sort of greenish color in tints on the robe, which you can just see a little bit of here and here. Mm-hmm. And it's casting the brighter light up to the edge of the cloak, and you can see where then the shadows are being cast, where his swoopy dress, and yes, high elves wear dresses, is blocking out this bottom light from getting up into the cloak. And I learned my lesson from last time, Paul. As you'll notice that I tried very much to brighten up the edge of the rock around it to make sure the light was casting down, that this moss here is very bright, whereas this stuff down here is very dark, where the light wouldn't be hitting it at this angle. So
that's what we like to see, Vince. Learning as we go.
That's right, just learning lessons. Yeah, so they're from the same thing. From this side, you can see the green getting cast up onto the white cloak a little more there. And there, the white tip. And then compared to the back of the cloak where it's, I tried to think of like, where is it getting fluffed up? Where is the light still going to be catching some reflections on this cloak? And where is it going to be thin enough to where it's showing through or something like that?
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go. You can see like over here where the light isn't reflecting down the rock.
Yeah, so I like this. I think that you pretty nailed it. Getting some object source lighting that's bright coming on a very bright mini. Obviously, you have your whites and blues here and golds, and it's a very, very bright light miniature. And getting the nice subtle greens on there is sort of an art. You gotta make sure that you have just enough so you can notice it, but not so much that it looks like you're just painting on the robe, right? So
right.
Yeah, that's a very fine line to walk in this situation. And as usual, Vince, you like to take the challenges and dial them up to 11.
That's what I'm here for. I mean, success or fail, I'm gonna swing for the fences. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. I totally dig what you did here. I don't really have too much to add. I mean, it's really sort of a hard concept to elaborate on, right? I mean, it's sort of taking, again, this all boils back, those lessons you learned in non-metallic metal about where the light reflects and where the light's going to hit is just applied on this concept here, right? You just take that point where you're normally shining and put it at a different location, and instead of using your normal tint color add the tint of whatever object you want. You know, fire, you add a little bit of orange or yellow, and you know, this your ethereal kind of blue green color or whatever your green color. Sort of add that tint. Don't cover the color that you're shining on, but you know, just tint that color.
Yep. As far as method, what I would say here is I think you know the big lesson for OSL is glazing. Like it's to me this was just an adventure in glazing back and forth forever, right? A little bit of the ethereal green, a little bit of white, a little bit of blue, mixing it all together and glazing it super thin, just back and forth and back and forth to get these blends as smooth as possible.
So this was brushwork for you.
Yes.
So I, on the speed side of things, was not in a brush. So this was a good example. We'll have a good contrast here of what you do with a brushwork and what you do with an airbrush. So it'll be perfect. But yeah, I think that in my planning stages, I did want to do brushwork, and I think it is. Yeah, I totally agree. Just a lot of glazing and sort of working it up. My personal preference is usually, I don't know if you've done this or I still do the same thing sort of with an airbrush. Whenever I do OSL or sort of lighting, to make the color pop a little bit, especially because usually your colors are down. Usually you paint the whole miniature and then go back and do your OSL, right? This is something you do totally after you've done painting. Is that correct for what you did here as well?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so usually what I like to do, especially when you're talking about something that's going on, you know, some harsher colors or even some dimmer color or darker colors, you know, if he's going over a dark brown of a cloak or something, what I like to do is glaze with a very light, sort of almost chalky white and sort of pull that in to where I want the color to shine. Again, very, very, very light, so it's not masking the brown, it's just lightening the brown underneath so that you can kind of get that reflection a little bit crisper. Right? Did you find you were doing any of that or?
Absolutely. I also find that I should be locked on my screen, which I just did. Hopefully, so like the whole time you were talking, it was on you. Hey, folks, every show, you can be, I promise you two things. Vince is going to forget to lock the screen, and we're going to look at Paul's face as we're talking about my mini. Fortunately, I was rambling at the beginning, so people got to see it.
Yeah, okay. Perfect.
Now we're locked. All right. So, yes, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think it's a good trick in general for doing that kind of thing. So if you, I don't have the pictures in this challenge, but if you saw that Stormguard Eternal, like the new guy from the White Dwarf from the Age of Sigmar that I painted up.
Yeah.
Like that was absolutely what I was doing to get the, like, cause I wanted the super duper highlights on him, right? Mm-hmm. For the edges of his armor. And that was absolutely like taking it up, glazing a lot with whites, and then glazing over top of that with the base color, right? Then taking that and tinting that red or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was the same thing here where like a lot of white and then tinting that with the bluer tone, right? Mm-hmm. And then just back and forth and back and forth. But yeah, I absolutely agree.
Awesome. I do have to say, man, if there's any positive out of Age of Sigmar, I kind of dig my models and rounds. I think they look pretty.
Yeah, like I was thinking about what to base him on, and I was like, hey, why not put him on a round? Like, you know, I don't have this army. It's not like an existing force for me, so I don't really care. Yeah. So I was like, sure, why not? Let's throw him on a round. And I mean, I've got to agree. Like, in the end, I like a good round base.
Looks good.
There's just something about it, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Maybe just human beings like circles more than squares. I don't know.
Could be. We like our lines and edges. I don't know. It's sort of when you think of something on a pedestal, I guess you think of something on a round.
There you go. The other thing I will say here about this, completely unrelated to our current challenge, but I want to talk about it anyways because it's a thing that I did, and so why not? The gold color, right? Mm-hmm. So the gold on this guy, I think is just like, I think pops just like poppy pop pop pop, like magnitude pop pop.
So we weren't. It wasn't part of the challenge, but I love the gold. Like, I mean, from this picture, it looks like the gold is just blowing out. It looks great on high elves like that. Yeah.
Yes, and that is the Vallejo liquid gold, the alcohol-based gold paint.
Yep.
This stuff is amazing. It is the best. Like, I've been on the search for a gold paint for a long time. Like with silvers, I feel like or metallic, you know, gray metals, that is to say, I feel like the Vallejo, Game Air and Model Air line is good. It's solid.
Yeah.
It's got good coverage. It provides a nice shine. It generally looks like how I want it to. But golds are just, even in their lines, I've been consistently let down by them.
Yeah.
The Vallejo Liquid Gold range, the alcohol-based paint, it's a pain in the ever-living butt to work with because it's alcohol-based. But that being said, it's hard to pick up any other gold after I use this. It paints on like you're painting with, just like you're painting with gold foil.
It's on there.
It's just on there. Yes, it's one touch done. It's so smooth. It's so like the brush strokes are almost non-existent. It dries to a real metallic shine. It is the most amazing gold paint product I have ever used. So, and I mean, if you look at the reflections of this guy, I mean, he's got, that looks like metal sheen because it is, right? That's what's in there.
I dig it. I was going to pick up some of that stuff, and I just ended up not doing it, but kicking myself for it.
Worth every penny, my friend. Let me tell you right now. And to our viewers, yes, I cannot recommend it enough. Once I started using it here recently on minis, I can't stop myself. Everything is that. Like, if I'm using gold, that's what's going on there. I'll take the trouble of working with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people say, like, it doesn't take a wash well because it kills the shine. Well, yeah, yes, if that's the last thing you do. But, like, why? That's not how, like, you right, exactly. Who's washing your metals and stopping? Come on now, people. You're better than that. Yeah, like, wash it down, certainly. This has a sepia wash over it, but and then just highlight it super back up. And they make plenty of different colors to mix, like the silver and the gold if you want like a really high shiny thing. Like, yeah. So not related to our current conversation, but hey, there you go. That's a little just intermediate tip from Vince.
Do it to it.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about some Skaven, man.
Skaven Warlord.
Yes. So which guy is this? Is this?
This is the limited edition Games Day model from I think like 2011.
I like him.
Yeah, I dig him. He's a really fun model. I actually like him better than most of the Warlords that are in the range right now.
All right, so take us through it, man.
So this one I actually did with an airbrush. I probably should have gotten some better close-ups for you here.
Here we can zoom. Which one do you want me to stop on? This one or the other?
Let's just start right there. We'll just zoom in on there a little bit and see where we got. Okay. So this here's my Warlord. He's just hanging out. We're gonna call him Skittles. Skittles the Warlord.
Very, very appropriate Skaven name, Skittles the Warlord.
So what I did was very similar to Vince. I picked my sources. I wanted the orbs to glow, and how I did this was actually with an airbrush. And normally what people will do is just do some crazy airbrushing where they blank out absolutely every color that was around previously. And I think that to me that's a mistake. You have this wonderful tool in an airbrush that can really help you with this, but you need to thin down your paints. What I did was I started with where I wanted to do the light, and I actually went around those orbs in that area with a very, very, very thin down white, and did exactly what we just talked about, and sort of made that area pop. So it's very, very thin. You can see through it pretty easily, and it just lightens up the area that I wanted to highlight. And then I went back through and used actually this is a glaze, so this is a ghost tint from Minotaur. If you don't have that range, Vince, I would suggest trying it out.
I really want to pick it up. Yeah, I don't. I've heard it highly recommended.
So the ghost tint, I think there's about 12 of them from Minotaur. They're just really nice tints. They're actually, I think, technically candy coats. The difference is there, the candy coat you need to seal the candy coat, or else it'll actually seep back up through the layers that you put over top of it. So just forewarning if people do that. I'm not sure the physics or the chemical reaction of that, but it does do it. I can attest to that. But this is a really nice effect, and it gives this really nice glowy effect. So it's this green range from Minotaur. So I did a nice little, very soft white, and then I went a little bit wider after that with my green tint. So that way the green went over the white and was really poppy close to the orb, and then sort of tinted around the area a little bit further away green, but nothing that really destroyed the colors that were already there. mean, you can see that the gold still look pretty gold. The helmet still looks pretty red. You know what I mean? So all those things should still remain the essence of the color that they were, just slightly tinted to the green. If we can go to the back, I think that I actually overdid in my haste. The back here, I feel like I did a little too much over by the head, just a little too much green. I don't know, but that's just my personal preference. I think it's still kind of glowy, but you just got to be careful with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we talked about airbrushes. There we go. Probably a good angle for it there.
Yeah.
We talked about airbrushes a lot on the last show, or maybe 2 shows ago. Some shows back, we've covered it, and I think people, forget that you can use a lot of the same techniques with your airbrush that you can with your normal brush, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can do your undercoating and then thin out that paint in an airbrush like crazy. So it's just the slightest sheen of a color over what you're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you can do things like if you want to control that, if you want to have a point that's blocked off, then, you can mask it off. And we've talked before about Silly Putty, as just the easiest, quickest mask in the world. And I think this is great. I like it very much. I mean, obviously, I'm always going to support my Skaven boys showing up on the table, but Skaven are like a fantasy army that if you really want to do some OSL, man, are they a great army for it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they all got the warp block engineers. All the warp stone can glow. You got tons of options there.
Yep, exactly. So many figs have these glowing balls and warp sensors and just piles of warp stone just all over the place. And it's basically uranium, I guess. Like, it's comic book uranium, right? Where it's this bright glowing green thing.
Yeah. Actually, so that dark, that almost black part on his backpack there.
Yep.
That's actually the warp stone. There's actually a warp stone hunk in there. And I actually went with the dark. I kind of liked it a little bit, just being different. Not making it a little bit different color, sort of like this dark, sort of material is getting processed into something that's kind of glowing and crazy. So it was sort of a nice contrast there. I felt good about that choice.
Yeah.
As opposed to the normal glowing everything.
No, I like it. I like it very much. And I like the extra highlighting. I think it works really well. The OSL works well here, I think, especially with the tubes. You got some good tube action going on. Another thing I love about Skaven, they got a lot of good tubes running all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think your color choice is really good here. Obviously, red with green, classic. I mean, there's a reason everybody likes Christmas colors. And so, there's a lot of reason. I think there's a reason you see a lot of Skaven done in red, because then it goes really well with all the green warpstone glow and stuff.
Yeah.
But I love taking the green up into the yellow, right? And like in the things like the tube, so it looks like there's a bright energy sort of flowing through that tube, and that's what you did here.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's all in all. So I know you were a little rushed with it, but what do you feel about him overall? You happy with how he came out?
Yeah, so I don't dislike him. Honestly, again, we've said this multiple times. I love this technique in terms of doing After Effects, with the gore effects. I'm just not really an After Effects kind of guy, to be honest. I sort of was a little more partial to him beforehand, but I don't dislike how he turned out. I had an interesting epiphany experience, actually. If there's one of these pictures with the shield in the front, is there one on the?
Yeah, there you go.
We zoom in there. So that shield, I don't know what I did today, and it's going to sound very hippie or whatever. I just let the paint kind of go where it wanted to when I was sort of just kind of putting it on. So that non-metallic metal was the fastest goddamn thing I've ever done in my life. And it turned out, I thought, really good. So I don't know what I did. I had some fucking magical epiphany or something, but yeah, it was just kind of flowing out of me today on that one. So I don't know.
Zen and the art of non-metallic metals. Yes.
I guess just let the brush go where it wants to go. Apparently.
Sure. Yeah. What you have lucked into, or the universe guided you into, because yes, the entire universe has come together to help Paul paint this model. I feel that's an appropriate use of that term.
Yeah.
It looks like the way light reflects on non-metallic metal, right? Like you've cut these reflection lines maybe accidentally, maybe not. Who cares? Like on, especially on the gold, it looks like the way it would be sort of catching it with the dents and stuff of the shield, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got me, man. I'm not gonna be able to reproduce that, but I was happy with that. And then I really liked again learning lessons right from the Faces challenge. I used sort of the same idea of sort of tinting it to a different color with his snout, and I also enjoyed how that came out. So bringing everything full circle here, and I feel like my miniatures are sort of coming together a little bit more and more every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you're absolutely right. On every one of these figs, I end up using things that we've talked about in previous shows, right?
Yeah,
And it's obviously a holistic experience. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You don't use one technique clearly when you're doing a fig. It's a combination of a bunch of different stuff.
yeah, and I think that's where it starts coming together, and you start feeling better about what you got there.
Yeah. I think the final thing I would say about OSL is, and you mentioned this calling back to the blood and gore, is that less is more, right? When you do this, don't just, if you're using an airbrush or something like that, don't just shoot your fig down and and there we go, it glows now. That's a glow gluing sword. Like, come on, that's not how that works or should look. When you do OSL, less is more. A little bit of glowing effect here and there captures it really well. If you think of yourself holding a flashlight or something like that, if you have ever been outside at night by a fire, yes, if it is pitch black night and you are sitting next to a bonfire, then the entire piece is basically dominated by OSL, right? Because that's the only thing that's creating color is that light source. But that's not what's going on here much outside of outside of a display piece that's part of like a diorama or something board.
Yeah, correct.
So you have to assume there's other light in this place where this person is, and it's not the only light source. And so it's going to clash to your eye if it's just overwhelmingly dominating and washing out the color underneath. I mean, if you think about it, all OSL is you mentioned it like it being at a different angle, but more than that, it's a closer light source, right? Like all lighting is sourced somewhere, right? It's just generally off the miniature, right? It's assumed to be of the sun or something floating up in the sky, but you don't just paint the fig in all white normally. You make these colors show. All we're doing is saying when the light source gets closer, it starts to dominate the natural color of the thing with its own colored light. But still, just as in normal light, you have a bunch of colored clothing that doesn't look white and washed out. So too does it take, you're not standing next to a baseball stadium floodlight, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
you're not glowing.
Right, exactly. Yes. All right. Well, very good. Anything else we want to say about OSL before we wrap that up? Are you happy with the challenge overall? Did you think this one was fun to do?
I do. I think it was perfectly timed. I needed a good hobbying, as we talked about, so I enjoyed it in terms of that. Again, it was something taking me out of my comfort zone. I don't like doing a lot of OSL and things like that. I think used properly, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Don't think I'm saying that. Don't use OSL or something like that. I'm saying it's just not usually my thing, my style. But it took me out of comfort zone, and I don't dislike it. So it was good.
Agreed. All right. Very good. There we go. All right, back to that. Back to us. So that brings us to, that was our OSL challenge. If you did some OSL or if you've done some, hey, send it to us. We would love to see the results of your OSL and your experiences with it. If you've got questions about it, put them down below. We'll be happy to answer them. As always, this is a community project. This is something we're doing, and we want to bring all of you into it. A little thing in my face, but you probably can't see that. Just looks like I suddenly lost my mind. And so by all means, share with us your work. We'd love to see it. If you got questions, we're happy to answer it. And that brings us to our middle segment with Paul and Vince's excellent hot tips. Yes, indeed.
Tip.
Hot tip. It's too hot.
Or is it hot tip of the week?
Oh, I like it. Yes. It's time to dim the lighting and get sensual with some hot tips. I know you're going to love these. All right.
Smooth tips.
Yes. All right. This is just the tips. So,
Oh no.
so all the puns, I believe, are now exhausted. So, Paul and I talked about what we wanted to cover this week, and we thought for the hot tip, let's talk about some of the sort of starting other stuff. Like we've talked about brushes, we've talked about paints some, but it's funny because to put paint to miniature, yes, you need a brush and paint and a miniature, but there's a lot more tools that you can use that will sort of expedite your painting, your painting experience and
And
make it a much
this
more
isn't
positive.
limited to painting either, right? I mean, you gotta prep a miniature, you gotta glue it together, you gotta get there, right?
Mm-hmm. Sorry
So
about
I guess yeah, no, you gotta wet the palette sometimes. You know what
that.
I'm saying?
Indeed.
Um, so I guess question: what are some things we're walking? We just picked up some sweet miniatures. We're friggin' pumped. We're gonna go paint some miniatures. But first, we're gonna stop off at our local craft store and pick up what, so we're ready to do it.
All right, I love it. Let's start out. So, it's funny because even when you buy the miniature, it tells you like, hey, you're gonna need some other stuff. So, I mean, obviously, of course, we've got all our basics, right? You've got some little snippy snips.
So these usually you can find these at hardware stores or at Michael's. I like to get the ones in the jewelry section. There's a lot of stuff over in the jewelry section where you can get some nice different. You can actually get different angled cuts. You can get flat cuts. You can get shear cuts. Some stuff that works nice to get stuff off the sprues.
Agreed. And the second part to that is obviously our friendly neighborhood, hobby knife, always essential.
X-Acto knife, right? So
Yes.
grab those. And I think people. So I find people get sort of stingy with the blades. I like to buy, the big pack of blades with it. So, hell, I'm going through the blades. I mean, as soon as that thing's been used a little bit, move on. Those things dull out pretty quick, especially if you're using a metal MIDI, right? I mean, I think they dull out pretty quick. So I like to keep it nice and smooth so that you can sort of trim and keep stuff from, not getting ugly.
Yeah, agreed. Removing your mold lines, your little sprue flash, all of that, very important. I'll tell you right now. And, even when you try, you're going to miss some. I miss it all the time. Like, I look at the mini over and over, and I'm sitting here going, like, and then I'll be halfway done painting and see some tiny little thing, and I'm like, God, like, it
Well,
happens.
sad thing is, right, is the natural lighting of, like, the actual lighting of the room will pick up a mold line like nothing, like no other, right? That will be insanely visible. So that's one of those things you got to be careful of and make sure that you actually carefully assemble your mini and get those out. So I think a good X-Acto knife and sharp knife. Careful. I like to wrap my finger in a pre band-aid. I band-aid up my finger before I actually start cutting, so that way I have actually multiple scars all over my thumbs from GW.
Oh, same here. I put a knife into this thumb when I was working on my big bloodthirster so hard, and then I like cleaned it out, but then it got all infected. Yeah, it's pretty gross, kids. Neosporin, it's a thing. Wash with alcohol and such. Like, don't. that was unpleasant.
Yeah. So I would suggest pre-wrapping that bad boy up before you start playing around. But again, we're in the basics here right now. We're in the basics. Uh,
Sure. I got another one. I got a
what's
simple one. That guy right there. That
Oh, the
little
hobby drill.
yes. These are like $5 with a set of pins on Amazon. It's super. You can see I have some cheap off-brand thing, whatever. I've got a couple of them, but this is one of them.
So what do you use that for, Vince?
So this is used for pinning your miniatures. For example, let's say you've got a completely ludicrous mini, like this thing, this little monster here, where he is balancing on his nonsensical wings, right? That are all ghosty. And by the way, this is clearly like the way things are going. People are loving, like GW clearly loves standing minis on tiny things.
Basically, yes.
Yes. So for this guy, his arms are pinned, so I can hold him by the arm. His wings are pinned to him, So I can do that. He's not coming off of there, even though the weight of the Mini is there. Both of his wings are pinned into his back, into the main bulk of the Mini. And I think people are scared of pinning because it seems like it's hard. This plastic is so easy to drill into.
Yeah, insane.
Your little pin vise, and my pins are paper clips. Just a big box of paper clips. You probably can find them at the office where you work. Not that I'm recommending you steal from the company with office supplies, but hey, if you happen to paper clip some papers and those come home because you're doing some work after hours, that seems reasonable. And that's it. It is the quickest, easiest thing. It is literally you run it in, you drill a little bit, you run to the other side, you drill a little bit, put a pin in, glue it in place, you're done. That thing will stick together, and you will find much less breakage. It especially helps if you're going to tournaments and things are getting jostled around in cars or God forbid in a plane. It is the shortest, easiest thing you can do. I also always pin them to the base for the same reason. Takes a minute of your time.
Much more sturdy.
Yes.
While we're talking about that, easy transition. What can I just use super glue on my plastic minis? Do I need plastic cement stuff? What are we talking about here?
That's another great question. Yeah, exactly. So glue, yes. So you want to when you're thinking about glues, it's important to have a couple different glues around. So I do have just some standard old super glue. There we go. That's just Loctite standard super glue.
My standard super glue of choice is Gorilla Glue.
Sure. And I use this whenever I'm not to do everything else that's basically not plastic mini. So like when I'm attaching cork or something like that to a base, right? I'll use this stuff. In general, though, for your plastic minis, you want to get something that's actually plastic glue, right? And what's the difference? That's for you, Paul.
Oh, so the difference here is the plastic glue will actually fuse the plastic together. So it's actually going to melt and sort of fuse the plastic, as opposed to super glue, which is actually just essentially an epoxy, where it's going to stick to both sides and harden up. The plastic glue is actually going to fuse those two together. So if you've ever popped off an arm of a mini that you use super glue on, it's really just kind of breaking the glue. It just kind of looks like, you sort of broke the glue in half, and you can still see the joint pretty well. If you ever snap off, which is actually very hard to do, an arm using plastic epoxy or plastic glue, you actually almost tear the plastic off. Like there's actually hunks of plastic on both sides. The joint is much more rigid. And what's going on there is that actually fuse that joint together. So if you can use plastic glue on your plastic miniatures, it's going to make sure that that's a very strong bond. It's just a much better choice than traditional super glue.
Absolutely. And if you've got something that's really that you can't pin for whatever reason, but you really need to get together, have you ever used 10X or 10X, however you say it?
No.
So it's like super plastic glue. It will literally melt it in front of your face. It will melt plastic. So it's a cool thing you can find at your hobby stores. Never use it on a teeny tiny little piece, but if you have a serious joint, the thing I think of is the Dark Elf Black Dragon, where he's like completely up on his little tail on that rock or whatever. Okay, and if you want to make sure that that's a really solid connection, that 10X will literally melt the plastic into itself. It will not. You cannot get it back apart. You have to snap it, break it like you would any other part of plastic. Yeah. Not a little melt. Seriously melt. You'll watch it melt. Just be careful with it, because if you apply, you only apply a little, because it does melt plastic. The other thing I would say is I see a lot of people when they put minis together, they glue it together, and then they sit there and play the waiting game where they're holding it forever, because it takes a while to set.
Zip kicker. Boom.
Yes. Once you use this, you will never not use this. This is my guarantee to you. This is a giant bottle. This will last you a couple armies. And I think this was $11, $12, something like that. I don't know. It's not too bad. This I put into a little bottle. There's my little, you can see it's almost empty because I use it so often. And what you do is you Put the glue in, you hold it in place, one little drop, instantly activates the chemical reaction. The chemical reaction superheats the glue, dries it instantly, helps it to melt the plastic, so you get a stronger bond. And it dries. You put one drop on, and 1, 2, 3, you're done. That piece is now stuck together, and it ain't coming apart unless you smash it on the ground.
Sounds
So yes,
easier.
it is way. Yes. So I am a big fan of the like Zap Kicker to accelerate your glue. Cannot recommend it enough. So, slight note: if you happen to be watching this and you're in like the UK, you may have to get like an off-brand thing or import it. It might be actually banned in the UK or something like that. I think maybe in a couple places in Europe, it's considered a toxic chemical. And I know I haven't. Yeah, and it is. It has a real smell to it, and some people are pretty sensitive to it. So I'll say, as a word of warning, like standard stuff, if you're going to use it in a well-ventilated area, all that kind of crap. I've inhaled enough of it, I'm sure, at this point in my life that like I don't. There's any brain cells that are left in my skull are immune to it, so I'm fine. But that doesn't mean you should not be careful.
So we had our brush, we had our paints. Now we got something to clean off the miniatures, but we didn't talk about sandpaper. I think you should get some very, very fine grit sandpaper for metal miniatures, because mold lines on metal miniatures are tough to get off. Just a little square cut of small grit sandpaper or your sand sponge work wonders. I think that's a great grab. Really, you can kind of hop into like Ace or like a hardware store, and you can get a bunch of hobby shit as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a craft store.
If you don't feel manly enough walking into Michael's Crafts, yes, you can also get most of this at Home Depot or something like that, so you can feel like a man. I'm gonna go play with my toy soldiers like a man.
I ain't no baby back bitch.
But I'm just saying, don't be afraid of a Joanne Fabrics. There might be a lot of things you like there.
A lot of great stuff. What else is there? So we're gluing them together. We're good to go. Primers.
Oh, I was going to say, how about this guy right here?
All right, there we go. Glue all. That's an easy pickup. Basing without glue all is impossible.
Yep. You gotta have your white glue for your base.
You just need glue all. Just pick that up, use it. I feel like that's just a self-explanatory one.
Yes.
Use it to glue things to your base.
Here's another one that's very handy. Here I got another one.
Oh, right. That's nice. Oh, I just picked up some of that. So that's tack, like what you would mount stuff on the wall with. Yep. And I don't know if you have a miniature right there with you. What you can use with that is you stick your mini.
You can actually see some maybe on his foot. Yeah. There you go. Holding him to the base there.
So what you use it for is you just use it to either stick your mini to the base or your mini to something to hold to manipulate while you're painting. Manhandling your miniature while you're painting isn't the greatest plan in the world, especially before it's sealed. Your fingers are kind of rough. You can easily rub off paint, and the oils from your fingers make it so the paint will not go on very smoothly. So definitely use something else. If you do really, really want to manhandle your miniature while you're painting it, I would legitimately suggest some nitrile or latex gloves, which can also be picked up at a lot of hardware stores. So just like Vince has got there. Feels a little weird at first. I work in a lot of laboratories, so it was pretty natural to me. But yeah, I think that's a great option. With the latex on there, you don't tend to rub off the paint, and you won't get any of your oils on there.
Yes.
Also, use
something to put your mini on. And just to go on top of that, if you can see, he's like, I have a little wire run through this one, so I can actually hold him down and then sticky on top, just to make sure something that's big, it doesn't come off. Do you see what this is? Like what I have him on?
The spray paint can.
Yeah, it's just a spray paint can top, right? Like this is no money. It's $0, right? Like just grab the top of a spray paint can, an old used paint pot, like a baby bottle.
I use the old GW paint pots to stick, my 20 mil, 40 mil guys on. Not a big deal. You can do that, whatever. It's just a good idea to not be manhandling your miniatures while you're painting them, especially not till they're sealed.
Yes. Absolutely.
Other grabs. I think I like a little palette, like a little dish palette. You can grab up one of those. I don't know if you have one of those, Vince. I mean, that's what, 99 cents.
Yes, I have a bunch of these. You can see that it gets used over and over again, but yes.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. You can put your washes in there, stuff like that, mix things up in there. It's just a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer. Not a mandatory thing, but it's sort of a nice little thing to have. And I'm sure if you have a significant other, they would appreciate it if you're not getting paint everywhere, especially if you pull out your painting stuff and put it on the table or something. So that's always convenient.
Here's a nice simple one that maybe is often overlooked because I stare at this thing more than probably more than I look at my wife. I don't mean that in an insulting fashion, but how about that? How about your actual
cutting mat? Yeah, my cutting mat.
Yes.
So I paint on the cutting mat. I don't know if you do as well. I
do.
glue everything right on it.
Yep.
I got one from IKEA for like $3. It's a big fat red one. Not hard. I think that's a good grab as well. Sort of build up your painting station, especially if you have a permanent painting station. It's not that hard to move around, but especially if you have a permanent painting station desk, I think that's a mandatory one. You can do your cutting on there. You can do your painting on there. You can do whatever on there.
Yeah, don't be breaking your nice desk, people. You invested real money into your desk. This thing is, your cutting mat is a few bucks. Do you know how many times I have just like been so grateful for this where I'm painting on it and I take a bottle, like I've had a full pot of like say Nolan oil spill over and I'm like, very upsetting.
Another reason why I hate those goddamn pots, just all over. God damn. I literally went out one time and bought a Agrat's Earthshade. I mean, this was a trip for that fucking paint. It wasn't like something I grabbed on the way out. Drove out there, got it, got home. 5 minutes later, fucking knocked that bitch over. I was like, God damn it!
That whole thing is ruined. If you're really careful, you can like scrape it back in. Like I've done that.
I have little pipetters. This is not a common thing to have in your workspace, but I have little pipetters. Yeah, those, and I was like sucking it up off the desk, putting it back in the pot. It was.
You can see this one is all green from the last time that happened because I spilled a green one and I had to do the same thing.
What else?
How about that? How about some little droppers? I honestly, so like here's some little droppers I use for like to do drops of water into my paint or to if I need to get something out of a pot. Like these have a lot of different little uses. This, if you're trying to get exact, measurements of like two drops of paint to 1 drop of water or something like that. Very useful. And by the way, those are available from probably your grocery store. I got like a 2 or 3 pack of them for 99 cents. So, that wasn't exactly a serious investment to get some of those, but that's very useful, certainly.
All right, so I want to jump one, and I've been saying that, I think I've said this a couple times in the show, but for us advanced painters or people who are not just starting out or want to step to the next game, or their game up to the next level, I am a huge proponent of sketchbooks. I think that you should, I don't care if you just have pieces of paper or whatever laying around, but I like having a little sketchbook. Get yourself a nice little pencil and micro pen. Right there, Vince? That's one that we forgot. Just grab a little micro pen. You need a micro pen.
There you go. Little micron pen. You can see I have a colored pack because I'll actually use them in the color that I'm going to paint over them with. Yeah, again, like 6-pack was $5 off Amazon.
Yeah, no problem. Those we're going to start using these for freehand, for figuring out light angles, for stuff like that. So those are some easy, keep your sketchbook around. You can even write recipes in there. I use these 2 paints together for this flesh in this ratio. I've seen people do that. Sometimes it's real helpful, especially when you're not painting every day or something like that. If you paint, on occasion once every couple weeks, it's real hard to remember what you painted on something, especially if you're painting a whole 40-man unit or something over the course of 3 months. Sometimes you paint and come back to it and you go, what the hell did I paint this with? So something like that's a good idea, sort of write down what you're doing and sort of keep things organized. Again, I'm sort of a scientific mind, so my notebooks and things are always a priority.
You mentioned the workspace, like if you have a dedicated workspace, and let me say this. I understand some people have really small apartments and it's a luxury maybe not everybody can afford to carve out some space. But I'll tell you right now, if you can, even if it's just a small desk, like that you go and you get somewhere and you set your stuff up near it. If anybody who says like it's hard for me to paint, okay, like if you're ever a person who has said to yourself it's hard for me to sit down and paint, set yourself up a small paint station. I don't care if it's a desk in the corner of your living room
Yeah.
or your bedroom or an office or out in the garage. You can probably, you need what, 6 square feet, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
Just something that you can walk up to, sit down, and start painting. Not something that you have to set up, because the more you have to do to get ready to paint, the less you're going to want to paint.
Exactly. Lower your own barrier of entry. Like, use your future self wants to be lazy. Okay, future you viewers, if it's all packed up, I guarantee, no matter how motivated you are at this moment watching the show, future you is a lazy piece, and he or she does not want to get out the paint and go to all the trouble and start doing all this work. So defeat future you with present you by setting up a dedicated space. That's what I would say.
Exactly.
Yes. It's much like Terminator. It's the same story. You just got the future you is going to come back and try to mess you up. Just defeat him now in the present. It's all good. Here's another like nice little small thing, especially if you work with metal minis very often. So this is my file set, right?
Oh yeah, file set's always handy.
All sorts of, like, whether for your rounds, your flats, all that kind of thing. Again, none of the, there are some of these that I would rate as more important. If you work with plastics a lot, probably not as necessary, because you can just sand it off or scrape it off with an X-Acto knife. If you work with a lot of metals, invest in the $8 to get yourself a file set that will last you the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
You will not regret it. That is what I will say to that. What else you got? What else are the basics of just tips and tools that we use to get there, to get the model up to the next level? I have another one while you're thinking. And that is, we've talked about it a little before, but that is your mediums, right? These things to thin your paint out, we've covered them in some previous shows. We talked about glazes and using them. I'll talk about it again now, because I can't hammer the point home enough that I find this to be an utterly essential tool. If you are serious about your work, if you want to do highlighting and layering, get yourself some medium. It doesn't have to be this little bottle. You can go get it in big giant bottles for, again, super cheap. And use that to thin your paints. That, like, if you're a diehard Citadel, that's cool. Buy yourself some Lamia medium. Okay, that's what we're talking about. I know when I was down with Lord T down in Shreveport, I was talking to some of the guys in his group, and they were wanting to really take some painting up to the next level. And I said, well, how are you thinning your paints? And they said, well, I'm either not or I'm using water. I said, look, just get yourself some of that Lamia medium or whatever. It's right there. If you're using them anyways, spend a couple bucks. You will love the results, because you can get that paint thinned down, get that paint more translucent without losing and get your transitions a lot smoother.
Yeah, I think that's really it for basics. Just grabbing stuff. Get hobbying. Get your stuff.
Absolutely.
Get hobbying.
That's right. Like we said at the top of the show. I mean, the reality is, hey, don't let concerns over what else is going on in the game interrupt your hobbying. It's a cleansing thing. It really is. Like, once you get into hobbying and you start doing it a lot, I really mean it when I say, like, for me, it is sort of a Zen thing, right? Like, when I have a stressful day, if I'm like painting a mini, that all goes away, right? Because you are going to experience the direct result of effort and creativity, and you get to see something you've created come to life. That's an amazingly rewarding thing. It is the best part of this hobby, in my own personal opinion, my humble opinion. There are many great parts of this hobby, but the thing I love the most is the chance this hobby gives you to create. So, paint some stuff. Just paint some stuff. You're gonna love it. That's what I'll say. And if you're watching this, you've already taken the first step. You followed tip number 11 from our original show, which is go on the internet and look at what other people are doing.
Exactly. All right, so I think we're on to what are we doing? What are we doing with the show? What's coming up? What are we doing?
Yes. All right. So is it my turn to read or your turn? Who's reading?
I think you're reading. Are we doing something special? Are we painting this freaking box set? What are we doing?
Oh man, you know I want it. Well, I'm picking up my box set next week, but I think we should leave that for the challenge. I think we should set that for the challenge for our next show. Is that
Okay.
fair?
Yeah.
That way you can think longer. I'll let you. Maybe you can find somebody to go in halvesies with, and you just get you get some part of it or something, right?
Okay.
But I've got my box set. I already painted my first guy. He's not within arm's reach, but I posted him up on the PMP. Which, to everybody watching, if you're not already part of the PMP, join the PMP, Google Plus community, Painters Motivating Painters. It's a great community for people who hobby and want to join in the discussions. All right.
Do we have any questions?
Ah, yes. I was actually just looking at that. War General T was just checking in, and John Crayer says pinning plastic is super easy. Pinning metal is a little more difficult, but still fairly easy. Drilling completely through an old metal warp lightning cannon, not so much. I'm going to lean away here for a second. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Always within arm's reach, but yes, for your more difficult pinning jobs, you may recognize this as a power drill, okay? And you can put the tiny pin from this into here. And believe me, I have many times. And when I'm working with metal figs, like when I was doing my Fiends of Slanesh, which are the old metal stupid cows, the cow anteaters, you bet your bottom dollar I had the pin in this thing and was going to work. Now, be careful. You're using a power tool with a very tiny metal pin going at very high velocity. If it jumps off that mini, it will go straight through your finger. And I have absolutely put it into my hand before, and that is unpleasant. So be very careful.
Essentially, what we learned from the show is we should all wear chainmail gloves when assembling minis.
Absolutely. This show is called "How to Screw Up Your Body by Hobbying." All right, and then Lannis03 says, "Gah, future me is lazy." And then he's looking at all his shelves of unpainted minis and saying the past him is pretty lazy too.
True.
That's very good. I like that comment. All right. Other than that, no questions. If you got any questions about all of it, put them in now or later. We will answer them. More than happy to. All right. Let's go to the challenge for next week. So yeah, I'll tell you right now, Paul, all discussions about AOS aside and the game and all that, because obviously that's not what this venue is for. I love those figs. I was in the Games Workshop store picking up the White Dwarf, and the one that came with the mini. Mm-hmm. There you go. Ooh. And these guys, like, to me, the only problem with these dudes is their heads. Like, model-wise, I don't like the faces. So I replaced it with a Bretonian Night Helm. Interesting story about these guys. Their heads, even though they're bigger, their heads are the exact same size as all the other heads for your normal human-sized dudes. So
tiny head guys.
Yeah, because their armor is so huge, right? So head swaps are super easy. And I used a Bretonian Night Helm on mine, and it fit perfectly. So yeah, there you go, a little tip. But I saw these angels and this big lion guy, whatever, lion, dragon, cat thing, up close and in person. The detail level and such is just amazing. So whatever, I'm super down for it. But for this time, why don't we stick to our list? How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. So let's bring up the list. All right. All right, we got, as usual, 10 items possible on the list where we set up our next challenge using the D10 of fate, of destiny, of justice. All right, so number 1, a basing challenge. Do some creative basing. You were never going to get that one. It's going to make me sad. I'm excited for that one. Yeah. Number 2, freehand capes. Oh man, yeah, that's a rich palette of opportunities there. Number 3, maybe an ironic one, but unit filler. So there you go.
Oh.
Just jabbing the knife in. Number 4 is difficult colors, yellow. I hear people complain about yellow all the time. You know, I think Doom and Darkness was talking recently about how he wants us to do this challenge because he had some yellow he had to paint and he didn't get a chance, and we haven't done this one yet. So I promise, Doom, it's coming, man. We're gonna do it. You just need this to be a number 4. Number 5 is gems. So I'm glad I got a lot of high elves back there on the cheap because obviously, yeah, high elves, they're just crushing the gem game. They're like they're just like rappers. They've got so much bling on them. Number 6, painting pure white. So doing a good white. And we're going to have to not do an airbrush for that because white gets a lot easier with an airbrush. That's cheating. Yeah, it's got to be brush white. With an airbrush, it's, yeah, pretty fast. Ethereal painting, number 7, spooky ghosts. You can see it. So something like with this guy. Oh, I hope we roll number 7. Boy, that would.
So something well. Like you maybe filled in that challenge, and we're assembling a more gas at the same time.
That may have happened. I don't understand your point. It was my turn to pick. Number 8, true metallic metals. Number 9, painting a whole unit. So how to do sort of factory painting on a larger number of figs. And number 10, that big mother, painting a giant monster, which, by the way, in case it's not obvious, that is my favorite thing. Boy, I would accept a 10 any day of the week. I love giant figs. All right, so shall we spin the D10 and let fate take a hand? All right, here we go. The die is cast. The result, sorry for everybody for motion sickness here real quick. Can you see what it is?
9 again.
It is a 9, yes.
What do we got? Painting a unit? God damn it.
Painting a unit. All right. So I hope you. So do you have a unit handy that you need to paint? Any unit of troops you haven't gotten done?
I got stuff up there.
All right. This is terrible timing for me because I'm like a month off from getting like 3 armies in. I did the Mantic Kickstarter for Kings of War. I got like 3 armies in it. Yeah. So shame I'm doing this now, but that's all right. I'm sure I can find some units to paint. Maybe I'll do some skeletons. That's always like cheating. Skeletons, the best unit. All right. Okay, so Thiefin says, Vince, did you play a lot of third edit win? That's your question. That's strangely phrased, but I'll try to answer it. Do you mean 3rd edition D&D? Yes, I did throughout its entire run. Do you mean 3rd edition Warhammer? No, I started fantasy in 4th edition. If you mean 40K, yes, and that's when I started playing 40K. So there we go. Is that a good wrap up to all the 3rd editions? There are others, I guess, but hopefully that's answering that question. So there you go. All right, painting a unit. Do you have any idea what unit you want to do?
I do. It's a secret.
It's a secret to everyone. We're playing Zelda all of a sudden. That's fine. I'm with that. I
can tell you that it may be from a less than tasteful game.
I'm excited already. I can't wait. We've never promised tastefulness on this channel. So if I sense that this is dedicated to hobbying. You get a unit out there. I think the rules and the lessons can be applied no matter the game. That's not what's important. You want to knock out a rail crew out of or the rail crew out of Malifaux. That'd be fine. All right. So there you go, folks. Challenge set. Painting a unit. We're going to show up with tips for how you can factory paint or sort of quickly paint a whole unit and sort of a factory line setup and make it look good. Make it look like something that's not just to a standard tabletop standard. Well, I said that was a poorly phrased sentence. but to a higher standard, right? Like there's no reason that just because you're painting a unit, you got to take that down and make it crappy. We're gonna up the game. We're gonna take it to the next level. I got 150 Skaven slaves behind me, and I took plenty of time on every one of those, but and none of them are tabletop, but I think they all look great. Are they as good as like maybe an individual big monster? No, but that's not what it's about. So we're gonna stick to our mantra, right? Which is faces, bases, shields, and standards, and we'll get through that unit. Any closing thoughts?
God bless America.
There you go. That's right. Happy Independence Day. God bless America. And we'll see you next time. We will see you in 2 weeks. Talk to you then. Thanks, everybody.